Okay, so thank you all for joining. I don't know what's the number of this meeting today, but we've met starting the 30th of August. So I think we are about to reach the 9th meeting of this task group at the moment. The meeting is recorded. It will be eventually published on Google. I remind everyone that we're subject to the code of conduct, which has been published online. I'm pasting the link in. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm pasting the link in the chat. Where's the chat? Here. There we go. And that's the gist of it. So let's start with the previous meetings minutes to see whether any of you has a question, or else otherwise we can approve that. Is there any objections to the meetings from last call? I've published the link. It was the 6th of December. Published the link in the chat too.
None from me.
Okay, great. If there's no objections, then let's do a roll call to look for agenda items. Start with you, Steve. I'm going to go backward.
Oh, yeah, here, and I'd like to discuss whether today or in the backlog, I'd like to discuss the Perl type definition.
Mm-hmm.
In a machine readable format. There's that one GitHub issue for that. If we go down that route, we could theoretically just reference that Perl type definition in the specification itself without actually referencing the Perl types themselves.
Yeah. That's definitely part of the interesting thing. Okay. Adam, is there a topic you want to bring up in the agenda? Okay, nothing. Yanis?
No topics from me.
Okay. John?
Nothing in particular for me. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, and on my side, I'd like to report on the call we had on Wednesday, starting to work with the community for triaging the issues. So that's one thing, and specifically also some of the wording for the spec and how there's opportunities to streamline and simplify things based on the feedback of this triage meeting, by the way. Well, let's start with you, since we only have these two topics. John, I'd be interested also to get a bit of input on where you're at on your side, also on the triage. Just give a bit of update, that'd be useful.
Will do. Absolutely.
Good. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, the other thing that I was going to mention,
Sure.
we might want to consider as a topic for today. Obviously, we're not going to solve it today, but there has been an increased community desire for Perls representing stores, such as the Microsoft Store, Google Play, Apple App Store, those types of things. And we need to discuss a plan to engage with those vendors to help us construct Perls that would be not only representative but accurate, because again, most of this information is not going to be public. We just want to make sure that the Perl types that we define will in fact reflect reality of how those stores actually operate.
Yeah, it's actually a good thing, because I don't know where it applies on an enterprise setting, but it's definitely something from a consumer settings, and whether it's Chrome stores, the Microsoft Store, Google's Play, Apple Store, and all that. That's, yeah. And generally speaking, I mean, they don't always have the essential characteristic I would expect from a package type. We cannot get to the source, for instance, most of the time, but we have a way to download the code. Yeah. Yes, I see you laughing. I don't know why. But at least
Had to be me.
there's a naming, there's a versioning, there's a central hand that organizes unicity of identification, and there's eventually a stable way to go to the binaries at the minimum. Even if in some case it has to be mediated by some specific app, it also usually has a home page. There's a lot of interesting things, by the way. I don't know if you know, but for instance, on Google Play, you can upload an application with any version you like. So you can have the first version could be version 12, and the second version could be version 2. They don't care, because really the only thing that matters is the sequence in which you've uploaded these versions. And internally, they track version 1, which is whatever you named or labeled as version 12, and version 2, which is whatever you labeled as version 3, which was the second you uploaded. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there from a Perl point of view. If you think about the versions, in a way, when you have this kind of strong centralization, you can solve version by ignoring them entirely, and you just put a counter.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So so definitely, to me, I don't think anything special there. I think getting folks which are interested in each of these ecosystems. Ideally, we want to have the anchors of this ecosystem to jump in and say, hey, this is how a Perl could look like. These are the key identifiers that are unique and that you can observe. I think the difficult thing is going to be when you have, say, I have an iPhone and an app installed, or an Android phone and an app installed. Can I discover something which will be between quotes Perl? That's the key point. Can I observe the software and find a Perl? So what are the characteristics that I can observe to infer what software it is? Would be super interesting. And it may be completely different on each of these. That's okay. Cool. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of interest, by the way, around, we already discussed several times, but around the typically C++ package, which leave off the main package registries, which is a problem for companies that build and software team that builds software using C++, which is not an unknown quantity. I mean, it's still a lot of serious code that's built on this software programming language. Good. All right. So, second thing you wanted to discuss about Perl type definitions?
Yes. I do believe, while we don't need to necessarily have that complete, I don't expect to have that complete, right? That is not a prerequisite for us to get the Perl spec done. I think what is a prerequisite is deciding whether or not we are absolutely going to do that or not. And if so, we need to incorporate at least the reference to the schema or whatever else that we decide so that we know what to put in the Perl spec document.
Yeah. So my personal take is, should we have a structured approach to capture the data of a Perl type? Is 100% yes. There's no, I don't even, no afterthought at all. The difficulty is, can we come with a minimal approach and a minimal schema of what this structure looks like in time for the specs, say in Q1? That maybe not. It's not rocket science. It's not like we don't have the substance, which are all the types definition that exist. As the matter, the input to infer a schema that covers them all, right? And just to be clear, to make sure we're aligned on things. The idea would be to say the definition of a Perl type is something which has a certain number of data field attributes, and we define what is these data field attributes in a schema. An example would be, what is the package type name? What is the default repository for that? And so on and so on. So the attributes, which is essentially what we see in the Perl type definition today as what we repeat over and over again, and we just would put that in a schema. Right.
That's exactly my thought process. Like, what are the required things? Like, is the namespace required or not?
Exactly.
NPM versus Maven, for example. One is optional, one's required. Some don't have them at all. What are the allowed characters? Or we could do the opposite. What are the prohibited characters? Whether whether the thing is case sensitive or not. All that.
There's a finite number. The only question, and we don't need to answer now, will be, will there be something that we can do within the spec process in Q1? I'd say maybe, probably quite likely. I just don't want, I need to put my head a bit more around it to make sure we don't overcommit. In all cases, if we cannot finish that in time, it could be in the next version of the spec, and we can allude to it in the main spec saying, hey, for types, we're working on the structured definition of the types with well-designed and well-known set of attributes for each types, which will come in the next iteration of the specs.
Right. Okay.
I think both work, and but I don't think it's absolutely, to me at least. I don't know about others in the call today, but there's zero controversy about that. It just makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to kind of get that out there. And when you mentioned that you're altering the document, right, to make it clear in some cases and that sort of thing, we'll just need to somewhere in that document incorporate, even if it's a link to the 0.1 version of that schema, right? Just being able to kind of reference something, even if that something is not complete yet.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing, by the way, you mentioned we could list characters which are allowed or characters which are not allowed. It's interesting. There's this this guy that works with Red Hat and that helped organize also the triage meeting on Wednesday, who has a lot of experience on specification. He was an invited expert on W3C specification committees, and he's super smart. he was telling something which is obvious in hindsight, which is you can have a spec that defines things that you cannot do or things that you can do.
Mhm.
There's usually a limited number of things you can do and an infinite number of things you cannot do. And which means that there's actually an interesting discussion there. It's a tiny point. We're talking about a column that separates the PKG column from the type, so PKG column NPM, and whether you should encode or not the column. And that sounds small, but that's leads to all the discussion you have in the PR 360 that I'm sharing just now. 361, sorry. And I think here there's two things. Is we can probably streamline the specs. That talks, by the way, to the topic I wanted to bring up. But we can probably streamline the spec by, let me share my screen briefly so it's also there for the record. Share. Now, entire screen. So that was a suggestion to come with a positive assertion of what we can do as opposed to what we cannot do, which says the scheme and type must be separated by a column. It doesn't talk to encoding. And John brought a point afterwards saying, but you know, 100% guarantee that someone will come and says, well, what about the encoding there? And my idea would be to say, hey, in the spec, we're going to have that. So that's simple and clean. It's unambiguous. People will have questions. So let's start an FAQ and come with a way to address these concerns, but outside of the spec. So it makes the spec cleaner. We're still catering to all these potential negative questions. And over time, we may have an infinite number of these. That's okay. We'll just answer to them if they're worthy encoding. So as an example here to say, hey, is the column between scheme or type encoded? Or can it be encoded? Yes. How? And so on. And just saying, hey, you know, there's no mention of that, so don't do it. And provide guidance on parsing. And one of the mistake, I guess, in a way, on the current spec wording has been try to mix up assertion of what the spec is with guidance on the parsing and answering questions at the same time, and FAQ. And it's going to be simpler to separate that in different bits.
Okay.
Should there should be a must here?
That's very possible. That's very possible. So now, which brings another topic which we discussed briefly about using RFC 2119 and its buddy 8174 or something like that for must, should, and else. And I understand that Ecma doesn't want uppercase in the final document.
That is correct.
In the short term, for the sake of clarity in our mind, I think we should uppercase, use the uppercase words of these two RFCs, and
That's fine.
later in the process tone that down to just use 2119 and make it lowercase. It's just going to be simpler in the short term to make sure we're clear.
Yes.
It's going to be very quick to do a final replacement to meet Ecma's requirement. Which, by the way, John Horan, who is on the call right now, you found a place in the CycloneDX Ecma spec where we still use uppercase.
Well, I did. I was doing a count in the PDF, and it's just slightly different in the, I think, the generated version of the spec, but should has a number of uppercase occurrences.
In the
I was
PDF,
just to, I'm not waving any of my fingers, not at all. I'm just looking for guidance because I look to you and what you and your colleagues have created as sort of biblical lowercase b guidance.
I appreciate that.
I'm amazed that we spent some time discussing counting the number of angels on the pin
Right.
instead of a P. But we're talking here very simply about the column, and there's been questions. It's been a interesting question. So, if you guys agree, having this combination of streamlining the spec and starting an FAQ so we can answer these questions outside of the spec, I think would be very very useful. And Yanis, to your point, is it a must or should? We need to address that. We need to make sure we sort that out.
It looks like 2119 treats them as equivalents.
Yes, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except that should be is recommended. Here, it's really a must. There's no question that there's a must here. I mean, we could have worded that separately, saying the Perl must start with the letters PKG followed by a column.
The solution, I think, to removing the ambiguity is just not use the word should.
Yeah. We should try that then.
Break the build if somebody submits should.
Yeah. No. So Yanis, unless you disagree, I think here the specific thing is it's not should, it must. And
yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, it's really must. There's interesting effort going on where creates an EBNF specification for the Perl core spec, and I discovered a tool called Rex, which has been out there for a long while. Sounds like, which is able to generate parser implementations using an EBNF grammar, and there's not too many of these around. But it's able to generate that in Java, in Python, C, Go, and a few other languages. So it seems to cover a lot of bases. I would not want to have a formal grammar for the sake of a grammar if we cannot use that in tools afterwards. That would have been a bit sad. But I think it could be something. So the question is going to be if we want to have if we go with a grammar, do we want to have the grammar in the spec too? Generally speaking, I'd say yes, but it could come. I don't make that as a prerequisite. It would come in a subsequent version, a minor revision of the spec, saying, "Hey, we have an EBNF grammar that's been thoroughly reviewed to match the actual spec and helps you generate implementation that pass all the test suites and so on." Which brings another question. Do we want to have the test suite part of the spec or not?
I would advise against it.
Okay.
I think if we link out to the schema as a reference for Perl types, well, then that tells you what you need to validate, and the test cases are just a positive assertion that you are in fact doing that.
Yeah, actually, we could makes sense. We could actually move the test suites fragments to each of the types.
Yeah,
I think that there's really two levels there on the test. One is to provide a general illustration of what the core spec is. For some specific aspect of the spec, and the second one is to provide assertions on how a type should behave.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some like the colon between the scheme and the type, and the wandering slash between the end of the version and the beginning of the qualifier separator that are they're whatever the word is, they're not type specific. They apply throughout the world of the Perl.
So
I'm sure this will be easy enough to figure out how to address.
yeah. So we probably need to keep a few course tests, but with a few rare exceptions, I don't think there's any test of parsing and unparsing the Perl today that doesn't have a package type. Because that would be just something that starts with PKG colon, and that would be essentially, well, mostly harmless. All right.
Yeah, we
Okay.
in the CycloneDX community, I think we created a fairly decent regex that would validate whether or not something is a Perl, regardless of the Perl type. So, I mean, if the tools should probably, whether or not we want to include a regex or other kind of matching thing, because regex, you know, and rightfully so, gets a lot of heat. But I think in the conformance section, we can very clearly indicate that something is a valid Perl if it has these parts. And if you do not have these parts, it is not a valid Perl, and yet you must then not treat it as a Perl.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense.
That sounds consistent also with the Wednesday meeting and the what I understood to be I'm new to the concept, but relying to some extent on EBNF to guide our English prose in the actual spec and the affirmative verses and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right. So that's it on my side. I mean, the interesting thing is that we want now to dive into practical. I know we'll do that every other week, every third week, something like that. Meeting to have folks in the community join, and the goal there is literally to work concretely on a specific problem, debate that, come to a resolution, and put all the results in the issue. So that's one. Or second, task someone to work on a specific issues and come back with a concrete proposition. In all cases, that would need to result in actual structured and well-redacted, well drafted comments in an issue, in a PR or a new PR that address the issue. Just to help. I mean, the goal is really to move forward things. And again, there were folks from a lot of folks from Red Hat that were there and about code, and it's we will take making sure we can organize that. The thing that's really important. So if we think about layers of communications, there's a bunch of chat rooms. We have one on Slack on the CycloneDX chat. There's a matrix room we have also, but they're for that. They're transient chat. They're not meant to be there forever. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have these formal meetings every other week, where I expect we mostly bring progress and issues. And when there's complex decision to do, that's eventually a place where this could be made. But we're not about doing work. Well, in a sense, we're not about resolving issues in the spec or writing the spec. That's not where it happens. All the other work should eventually be on issues and PRs, and having community calls is just a way to make that process smoother, but it doesn't replace any of that. And there's going to be minutes also of these meetings anyway, the same way we have them here. The meetings minutes will likely go to the Perl spec repo or to a separate repo called meeting minutes. So there's no confusion with the work there. And it's much more relaxed. There's no formality, and it's really to do actual work on the spec and progress this issue, and this issue. I think that makes sense for everyone. If there's objections, I'm open there, but I think it's a good balance to make sure we make the best use of the time of everyone. So folks joining these triage calls may not be interested to join the Ecma call here and just bring their look at the minutes afterwards and the video. So yeah. Okay. So that was it. We have a video, we have minutes of that triage call, so they'll be published. We're a bit behind there, but they will be published eventually. John, is there something you want to bring or discuss a bit, just a high-level status on the triage side?
Yes, particularly as informed by the discussions you just summarized about from the Wednesday meeting. I'm still analyzing and organizing the various topics. I want to use the word issues, but it has a separate meaning in GitHub. So the various topics covered by the loosely defined encoding and related issues and PRs. But I'm now beginning I'm actually going to be using I think maybe it's 361, PR 361 itself to do my first proposed set of updates, and that will be for the scheme component. And given our discussions on Wednesday, last night I at least created the not yet fleshed out skeleton of an FAQ.RST. Unfortunately, VS Code doesn't have any way to display it, but I figured out an alternate just locally so I can see what things look like. And I started to move portions of the first section in the core spec that go through the 7 components for schemes. Some of those discussions of the double slash and whether it's an illegal and unwanted URI as part of the scheme. Portions of those I'm now integrating instead into the FAQ, and I've added a few affirmative statements, and I've removed a few of the knots that are no longer welcome there. So that'll take a little bit of time, but it clearly will end up in streamlining things. So I've got those two immediate, the scheme and the I'm sorry, I'm wandering a little bit. The other RST I'm going to be working on in tandem is the introduction of RFC 2119 and 8174, and a little bit of manual changes to the uppercase versus lowercase, but just trying to bring some uniformity to that. And any changes we'll want to have made to that should be really easy and quick. And of course, I solicit all of your thoughts on that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's worth summarizing, but not really, not at this point.
No, I think that's it. That's lovely. All right, so I think we've gone through the whole agenda today, and unless there's something else to bring up, we can call the meeting down.
I just had one question before we wrap up. In terms of timelines,
yes,
we want to get this to TC54 likely in February, right?
Okay.
So that they can review it in time to give it to the executive committee in March, so that it can be standardized in late June, early July. Are we going to be on target to meet that delivery of the final specification documents by the end of February? I'm going to need probably, I don't know, a few days, maybe a week and kind of take all that RST and put it in EC markup before I deliver it to TC54.
I mean, at a high level, yes. I don't want to make sure. I don't want to commit just now. So let's get a clear answer to this by the first week of January. If that works for you.
Okay. Yep. Perfect.
And so to repeat, you said presentation to the technical committee sometimes in February. Presentation to the Ecma executive committee.
How it works is that TC54, there's no presentation. We basically give what we believe is to be a final document to the executive committee by March. I'll have to get with Samita to figure out what that date is, but it's sometime in March. We can make between March and June, between then. The only thing that we can do to the spec is to make grammatical changes. We cannot alter the meaning of the spec in any way.
Okay.
So realistically, all these questions, they need to be fleshed out by the end of February if we're going to meet our June ratification objectives.
So, yeah, so I need to make sure we look at that in detail. At a high level, we've scoped things down the first time about a month ago, saying we won't put the types in the spec. And it was a small epiphany again this week to say we can even streamline the spec further by putting all these question and answers and oddities and negative assertion in an FAQ. Maybe it's going to be 10 lines of spec, who knows? Probably not.
20 pages of boilerplate, one page of spec.
No, but the point is, in the spirit, I think if we're able to reach this level of expressiveness and conciseness at the same time, that would be a good thing. Yeah. In any case, moving the types out, moving the question and answers and kind of do's and don'ts in an FAQ is a good thing and helps towards getting to spec, because we're going to have less content, and less content is a good thing there.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and we'll just have to balance. So we really want, as I said, do we really want? Can we have the type schema ready? Can we have an ADNF grammar ready? These kind of things. Or whether these go as reference in early versions, and then they're not really part of the spec. They'll be part of the next version of the spec. That's going to be the stuff.
Right. And the only other question that I have, Philip, is when is the next meeting? The one that's planned is on January 3rd. Are we going to have that one, or are we going to wait till the 17th?
I don't have an opinion there. January 3rd works for me. If it's an impediment to others, I think we can put that as a different date. So
I have no objection or strong opinion one way or the other. I guess if work is going to get done between now and the 3rd, then it makes sense to meet on the 3rd. If not, there's vacations and that sort of thing, then it may not make sense to meet on the 3rd.
Okay, what I suggest, I don't know how much work we'll be able to do with the winter solstice, and the new year, but let's assume we meet for now, and worst case we'll call it off if there's really no progress to report, or we have a very short couple minutes meeting, eventually even if only by chat, But I like to keep the reason if possible. I would prefer that. Okay, no objections otherwise, Adam, Yanis, John? All right, so, John?
No, it took me a while to find the unmute button. No objections.
Okay, cool. All right. So, thank you everyone for your participation. Have a wonderful day, or night, or weekend, and we'll see you next year.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Johannes.
See ya.
And
Thanks.
Happy holidays.
happy
Thank
holidays,
you.
everybody. Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.